I was 16 at the time. My mother and I lived in a quiet neighborhood, in a 2-story house on the outskirts of town. The neighbors were kind, the street was lit, the fence was neat, everything was just right. Mom worked night shifts at the hospital, and I was often left home alone. It didn't seem so bad. Until one night that changed everything. I remember lying in bed with headphones on, a playlist playing. The lights were dimmed, and it was starting to rain outside the window. The house was creaking, as always. But this time, one of the sounds was different. I took off my headphones, listened. A creak, somewhere upstairs. A creak that didn't sound like the usual wood aging. And then a second one, and another, in time, at intervals. Like someone walking right above me. My heart beat faster. The only thing above my bedroom was the attic. An attic we hadn't been up in years. I sat up. It was like the room was a few degrees colder. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not my own. Quiet, hoarse, paused. It was like it was coming through the ceiling, like someone lurking, right above me. I stepped out into the hallway without turning on the light. The hatch to the attic was closed, as it always was. But I could feel that someone was there. I don't know how to explain it. It's like feeling someone's presence without seeing it, without hearing it, but knowing that you're not alone. I wrote to my mom with trembling fingers. The answer came right away. Asterisk. Call the police. Call the police right away. I dialed the number. The dispatcher's voice was steady, but I could hear the tension in his voice when he interrogated. Do you hear breathing coming from the attic? While I waited, I stood in the hallway, unable to move. Suddenly there was a thud, straight from the ceiling, like someone had dropped something heavy. I jerked back, my heart pounding in my ears. It wasn't just a squeak anymore. It was an action, deliberate, a signal. The police came quickly. The car stopped silently. One officer stayed with me. The other opened the hatch, pulled out a folding ladder, and climbed up with a flashlight. We froze. The lamp under the ceiling shook slightly from the draft, as if the house itself knew that something was going on. And then a sharp shout from above. There's someone here, get up. I won't forget how they started to bring a man down the stairs. A man, dirty, thin, hair tangled. He was barefoot. His skin was gray, stained, his clothes torn. He stank. So bad I could smell it from across the hall. Officers found a sleeping bag, a box of empty food wrappers, a plastic jar with a lid in the attic. He snuck in through a window on the second floor. I forgot to close it once. He's been living with us ever since. 2 weeks. He waited until I left to go to the bathroom or turn on music to discreetly come down and get the food. He studied me, my routine, my behavior. One of the officers later said they found an old photograph of him too. It was lying next to his bag. It was a picture of my mom. Old, faded. She worked with him at the same hospital, but she didn't even know he existed. He was just watching, waiting, picking his moment. And one more thing. When they went up to his attic, he didn't resist. He sat with his arms around his knees and whispered something to himself, repeating, "He was here. I was just watching him. I felt like I'd been pierced. Who was he? Me? Or someone else?" The officer said such things shouldn't be taken seriously. The man was clearly mentally disturbed. But I couldn't forget the look in his eyes when he looked at me as he walked past. He didn't look angry, he looked empty, like there was nothing left inside him. We moved in just a few weeks later. I was different, neurotic, anxious. I started falling asleep with a flashlight under my arm. And yes, I became the one who checks the attic every day. Sometimes, multiple times, because I've since realized walls don't protect. They just hide what's already inside. I was in college at the time. The town was small, and I rented an old, shabby, but cheap house on the outskirts. The house was on the edge of a thick forest. There were trees in the back, a solid wall of green in which you could never see a gap, especially at night. It was a forest that even in the daytime looked like something out of a scary fairy tale. The house was old, creaky floors, a lone lamp in the hallway, walls with peeling paint. But the thing that caught my eye most was the back door, painted blood red. It was an old wooden door with a rusted handle and a heavy iron deadbolt that I closed every night with an almost superstitious fear. Its very shape, the chipped surface, and the old emblem in the center, everything about it seemed wrong. I often felt anxious at night, but I wrote it off as stress. I lived alone, and though at first it felt like freedom, as time went on I began to feel isolated, like I was outside the normal world, on the dark side of it. That night I was up late writing a term paper. It was pouring rain outside the window, and every beat of the drops on the roof was like a pulsating metronome. It was about 2 a.m. when I decided to make myself some tea and distract myself a little. The kitchen was dark, with only the faint light from the yard lamp shining through the closed blinds. I turned on the dim lamp over the stove, and that's when it started. The scratching. Slow. Stretching. As if someone's fingernails were sliding across the wooden surface with a tedious monotony. It came from the direction of the red door. I froze. My heart slowed down, as if unwilling to disturb the silence. At first I thought I was imagining it. Maybe a branch hitting the wall. But then the sound became steady, smooth to a frightening degree of precision. A cycle. Repetition. As if someone, or something, was enjoying the process. I stepped closer, stared at the red door without breathing. The scratching stopped. The silence became ringing. I leaned over and pressed my ear against the door, and that's when I heard it. "Let me go." Whispering, just beyond the tree. The voice wasn't angry. It was pleading, hoarse, like it came from someone who hadn't spoken in weeks. But it wasn't the end. A second voice, lower and firmer, came next. "We know you're in there." I gasped, backed away from the door. Fear struck in my head. Real fear. I rushed down the hallway, slammed the front door, clicked all the locks, turned off the lights. The house went dark. Only my heartbeat and raindrops could be heard in that sepulchral silence. I hid in the bedroom and with trembling hands dialed 911. While I was talking to the dispatcher, there was a knock. On the window. A steady, quiet knock. 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 Then the mosquito netting creaked. Someone was trying to take it down. I crawled to the floor, pressed myself against the wall, and prayed it was all a dream. When the police arrived, I didn't dare open the door right away. They went around the house with flashlights. One of them found footprints, barefoot. At first I thought it was a joke, but I saw them myself. Footprints pressed into the wet mud. They led from the woods to the door, then to the window, and then disappeared, as if those who had come vanished into thin air. The officer said, "These don't look like ordinary vagrants. There's something strange here." I moved out the next day. Didn't even take my things. But the fear remained. Sometimes I wake up because I hear the same voice in my head. "Let me go." And every time I see the red door, even in a photo, my heart sinks. The apartment was small but cozy. I proudly signed the contract, moved in, set up my stuff, and for the first time I felt, I am an adult. I own this space. No one interferes. No one walking around at night. No one touches my food. No one except me. I would wake up to the sound of my own breathing and feel the shadow in the corner of the room as if it were moving. Sometimes I thought the closet door was slightly ajar, just a little, as if someone was cautiously watching. I found grains of sand on the floor in the mornings that weren't there in the evenings. Once in the trash can, I saw a candy bar wrapper that I definitely hadn't eaten. The bedroom window was open wide twice, though I didn't even open it during the day. I was beginning to think I was going crazy. But every time I turned out the light, it felt like someone was taking a step closer. Even the refrigerator started to sound different, like it was breathing. The house began to feel like a trap rather than a shelter, but I still clung to the feeling of control, still tried to believe I was just imagining things. A month passed. Everything was going well, but then it started. First, the weirdness. I started to notice that certain items were out of place. A cup in the kitchen that I was sure I was washing ended up in the bathroom. The television would turn on by itself to a humming gray screen. The blinds were raised, even though I was closing them. I wrote it off to stress, work, the lack of sleep. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a suspicion began to brew. A suspicion that I wasn't alone. One day, I came home later than usual. It was past midnight. The apartment was dead silent. I took off my jacket, threw it on a chair, went into the bathroom, turned on the water. The steam filled the space. I started to undress, and suddenly I felt it. The warmth was replaced by cold. Not external, but internal. I stepped into the shower. I closed my eyes. The water was running down my face, and then I felt as if someone was watching. I opened my eyes sharply. The curtain was closed. I never close it completely. I never do. I have a compulsive habit of seeing the entire bathtub space. It's almost a mania. I knew I hadn't closed it. Slowly, with a heavy breath, I reached out and pulled the curtain. There he was. A man, wet, slick, almost blending in with the tile. His eyes were wide open. He was staring straight at me. Without blinking, he sat in the corner, as if part of the wall. His mouth was ajar. A barely audible wheeze came out of it. "I've been waiting," he whispered. I recoiled, ran out of the tub, slammed the door, barricaded myself with the vanity unit, and called the police. While I waited, I heard someone moving around inside. I heard something metal clinking against the enamel. When the officers arrived and broke down the door, he was still there, sitting there, with a knife. On the floor, an empty packing bag from my refrigerator. He was eating, waiting, planning. He snuck in during the day, he hid in the bathtub, and spent what they estimate to be at least 3 hours in there, just sitting there, in complete silence. Listened to me talking on the phone, singing in the shower, laughing at a meme. He knew me, I didn't. I've been living with roommates ever since. And in any bathroom, even when visiting, the first thing I always do is open the curtain. Slowly, without making too much noise. Because if one day I forget, and he's there again, there won't be a second chance. If you like to freeze in horror listening to real scary stories, if you feel a chill run down your spine, if you wonder what lurks in the dark, subscribe to Mr.Nightecho channel. Every story here is not just a short story, it's a warning. And remember, the creepiest things happen to those who don't subscribe.